I'm really excited because I am preparing garden beds for the most part today to plant my onions tomorrow. So I am actually just getting ready here to do a little bit of soil testing. You can send off your soil, which I have done in the past. It just typically takes like 4 to 6 weeks to get any type of results back. And honestly, I have had pretty good results with some of these cheaper tests that you just do at home. Big part about a lot of these tests, especially like pH, is you want to have some distilled water. So I have some distilled water here. So I'm testing for pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And what is nice is when you do send off a soil test to your local ag extension, typically you can mark a box, at least this is how it is for Kansas, you can mark a box on what you plan to grow in that soil, and they can give you a little bit more tailored recommendations. When you're doing an at-home test like this, you're figuring that stuff out for yourself, but for the most part, it's really nice just to see what you might be more depleted in and what you might be more in a surplus in. For example, my soil the last few years has been very high in potassium, and it's always needed some nitrogen and phosphorus. So for the most part, I've been trying to really balance this soil out with nothing that has potassium in it. I found that bone meal is a pretty good option to add some nitrogen and phosphorus back into the soil without adding potassium. So I'm really curious to see where this soil will be. This will be my third year doing soil testing with my soil. So I'm only going to do these 2 beds today since I'm preparing these 2 beds today. And what I need to do is dig about 6 inches deep and grab soil samples from about 6 inches deep in the soil around kind of all over the garden bed. That way it can give me a better adjustment overall on what the soil might be lacking. So I'll be taking a few different samples from the bed, putting it into a container like this. You can do 1 cup of soil to 5 cups of water, or you can just do a 1 part soil to 5 parts of water. So I'll probably do a half a cup of soil after I get all of those samples. And then I'll be doing, 2.5 cups of water, and then that will fit nicely in the jar here. I'll get that mixed up really well, and I will allow that soil and water to sit overnight, and then we will take our tablets and do our color testing for those things. But I should be able to go ahead and just do the pH now. The pH test doesn't have to sit or anything like that. So we'll just go along and do this together. And then honestly, this week is going to be a beautiful week. I'm honestly thinking I might plant my broccoli and things like that already, kind of jump the gun. It's looking like both of the beds are right around a 6.5 or so, which is in range. So I'm probably not going to do anything with the pH. So the other thing I really wanted to get done today was actually weeding my garlic and doing its very first feeding. Over the last week and a half or so, I have noticed that the garlic has really started to put on growth, and that is my indicator that I need to go ahead and start feeding it. So last year was my first year doing this method of doing all foliar feeds with fish and seaweed fertilizer, and I had honestly one of my best garlic harvests I ever had. So that is my plan going into this year as well. I'm gonna go through and get everything weeded. Garlic really doesn't like to compete with weeds, and weeds will also eat up some of that nutrition that you are feeding your garlic, which is what you don't want. So I'm gonna go through. I have these 3 beds here, and one thing you might notice is off to the left here, the garlic definitely isn't as big quite yet. This stuff really just started to pop up over the last few weeks because this is a little more shady compared to this side of the garlic here, but I'm gonna go ahead and start feeding it today. I will feed my garlic with the fish and seaweed fertilizer up until I see scapes, which will be roughly 4 weeks before harvest, and that typically is right around the first week of May for me. So my last average frost around here is mid-April, so we are still about 5 weeks or so from that, but I'm gonna go ahead, get this stuff weeded, and then I will show you guys what I use. Need the sun to go down a little bit before I do any type of foliar feeding, so I'm just gonna go through and actually take off this first layer of mulch over here where I plan to plant a lot of my broccoli and my lettuce and my cabbages and stuff. I'm gonna get this area weeded as well. I do need more distilled water before I can do any more soil testing, but I might go ahead and get the soil sample ready. And I might go grab more distilled water here a little later on. Go ahead. Here you go. Watch out. See how many eggs we got for the day. No way! Good job, ladies! We have not had an egg day that had 3 or more eggs in it since probably early October. I should have got the basket today. It is so nice that they have increased egg production. It's crazy the difference in some of the sizes at the moment as well, but very excited about this. Got them safe in the overall pocket. This is the fish and seaweed fertilizer that I use. I also use this for my seedlings, but I'm gonna mix up 1/8 of a cup of this with a gallon of water. I don't think I'm gonna need much more than that. Honestly, it might be more than what I need, but I'm gonna mix that up and I'm just going to spray my garlic real quick. Nothing crazy. If I have a little bit extra, I might go around to just like little plants and spray them, but nothing crazy. All right, guys, it is onion planting day. I finished off the soil testing this morning and it was kind of how I thought it was going to be. Is what it's been very similar to the last few years where the potassium is pretty high, but I am pretty deficient in nitrogen and phosphorus. So I'm gonna add some bone meal to this soil. And I think that's going to be it because the pH is also in range for both the beds. And that's what both beds were reading as far as lack of nutrients as well. So I'm gonna get some of that added in, and then I am going to go ahead and get the onions planted. So if you're new here and this is your first video, I started these seedlings it was like the last few days of December in 2024. Typically I would have got them out about a few days ago, but we've been having really windy conditions, and that is one reason why you see these hoops here. So this year I'm playing around with a different idea as far as trying to block some just crazy wind gusts, because last year we had a lot of days where we were having 50+ mile/hour wind gusts, and that made the greens of my onions break. So last year was my 4th year growing onions, and it was the first time I ever experienced where they molded in the curing process, where they were completely fine and then they hit week 4 and they were completely molding out. And after doing a lot of research over the winter, one of the things I'm equating that to is their greens breaking and then them being exposed to windy and also rainy conditions, because we had a really rainy spring and early summer last year. So my hope with the hoops is I do have some solar greenhouse plastic, and I have clips where I'm going to try to put plastic on both sides where they go roughly halfway up, and I clip them. That way I can block them from really windy days, but they still get really good airflow. And then I'm also thinking that if they are close to finishing maturing and they're starting to flop over, but I don't want to necessarily start to harvest all of them yet, I can cover them. My chickens have been so loud this morning. I'm really hoping this is going to be another great egg day because they've been so loud. But okay, anyway, my hope is if it's super rainy and they're getting really close to maturity and I'm cutting back on that water, because typically I cut back on watering the onions for that last few weeks, and we had pretty rainy conditions during that time last year. I'm hoping that I can just cover them as well, be able to pull the plastic fully over, and that's kind of my plan going into this year. Honestly, I don't know. It was really disappointing because I've never had that problem prior. I have cured onions. They lasted in my basement until about January or so before they started to sprout a bit, but honestly, like, it was just crazy. All of them were molded, and the more I read up on that, it's just breakage and possibly having things in the soil, and then that soil bouncing up with the water and then into that exposed area of the onion. So I'm going to get the bone meal added to this, kind of rake it in a little bit, and then we're going to get started planting these guys. Alongside the bone meal, I'm actually going to add worm castings as well. You'll see this is a pretty common practice for me. I will sprinkle worm castings into the soil when I'm seed starting. I typically add a little bit to each bed before I plant things. It's just my little thing. I'm like, oh, sprinkle a little bit of goodness. So the last few years, one of the things I've done with my starts is I've soil blocked them, and I've done roughly one, sometimes there's two onions per block. And not only does this give me really good, strong starts, it also makes my life 10 times easier on planting day, because I can just make a small little hole and plop one of these soil blocks in, and I'm not having to be tedious about pulling plants apart and disturbing roots and getting them in the ground quickly. The other thing is, I think it's a lot easier when I'm just setting the onion in there, because I can just set the soil block down, and the soil block is already at that soil level, to where I'm not having to be tedious about holding an onion start and pushing in the soil and making sure it's not too far deep in that hole, because that can affect your onions. So I'm going to get these planted. My action plan is roughly 8 inches apart. I might have a few in there that I might get closer to 6 or 7 if I'm trying to like squeeze one in a corner or something. But for the most part, these are going to get planted closer to 8 inches apart, and then 10 inches between like my row spacing. I'm planting out these 2 8x4 beds. And also, I think having a yardstick is super handy when you're planting something as tedious as onions or garlic or things like that, where you're just constantly spacing things out. This really helps. So I'm going to go ahead and just start planting. Okay, so that is what my idea ended up coming out to. I think I need to get more of these clips to be able to make it look the way I'm wanting to look. See how that's flapping over there? I need more clips. Overall, I think that will work. I don't know if I love it, but it will be really easy to change if I think of something else. And then that way, if I need to adjust it, I can adjust it. And again, this plastic will go all the way over. So I'm thinking that's a good plan. And the onions are officially planted. Look at this. We got 4 eggs again today. I am honestly completely shocked. I was thinking we were maybe going to get 2, but the girls were definitely rowdy today. I am so excited. Egg production has increased finally. The broccoli, cabbage, and lettuce are all ready to go. They've been hardened off now for a few days, and we have no frost in the future. And typically I'd be planting these out in about a week, 2 weeks or so. So I'm gonna go ahead and get them out. Last year they survived clear down to a 19-degree low. We had a really like fluke end of March where we got super low and everything did just fine. So I'm honestly not too worried about that, but I am going to finish testing the soil tonight. I have my soil test and I'm gonna allow the water to sit, and I'll do the same thing where this morning I tested everything after it sat, and I'll see if I need to do any adjusting, and we will probably get those planted out tomorrow, which is really exciting. Honestly, I'm just excited that the onions are planted, the garlic is growing, and it is feeling like a garden out here once again. The game plan is pretty much the exact same as it was for the last few days. So the soil over here is looking pretty similar to the garden beds where we are lacking nitrogen and phosphorus, but we are high in potassium. So my game plan for this is to add bone meal and also worm castings like I did yesterday. I'm going to take my garden fork, loosen up the soil just a little bit. The in-ground space tends to get a lot more compact than some of my garden beds. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to sprinkle the amendments, rake it all in, and then I'm going to get to planting. I have broccoli, romaine lettuce. I have some cabbage here today, kale, collards. I also started spinach from seed to try to do some starts because typically I have issues when it comes to direct seeding my spinach and having roly-polies just devour the young seedlings. So I tried that. I also might direct sow a few of those today, but the plan is to get these greens planted. I really want to try to finalize a spot for my strawberries as well. I really just don't know where I want to put my strawberries, and I've been going back and forth with a handful of spots. So I really just got to make a decision and plant them because I could go ahead and get those planted as well. This is actually the earliest I am planting these things, I believe. Typically I'd be planting all of this stuff out in about a week and a half, and I'm gonna go ahead and just jump the gun because our weather looks really great. I completely forgot that this T-post was in the ground still. Let's attempt to get this out. I had a really big volunteer sunflower that came up right here last year, and I had to put something to help hold it. And this was the best option. Oh, sweet. Yeah, that came out way easier than I was expecting. Maybe our soil isn't as compact. Cute. All right. I was really expecting to struggle there for a second. This soil definitely is not as compact as it has been in previous years. I do this every time I replant this area, and I just replanted this area in, I want to say September. So I'm just going to go through a little bit with the fork and kind of aerate a little bit. I'm really happy with how the starts look this year. Last year and this year was my first year feeding my seedlings with fish and seaweed fertilizer, and honestly, everything's going really well for year two as well. I really enjoy using that when it comes to my seedlings and various crops throughout the garden. So that is all I've been feeding these little seedlings with every 10 to 14 days or so. I'm about to start feeding the peppers now. I actually need to go thin those out once I am done out here today, but I'm gonna get broccoli planted right here. This is exactly where I had it last year, but I am doing a lot of rotating in the garden this year. I'm not doing a lot of rotating when it comes to the in-ground space. When it comes to the main garden though, a lot of things are getting switched around. So it's been really throwing me off because I've had to be very creative with where I wanted to position things when it comes to my sunlight. I'm going to plant the broccoli 18 inches apart. Soil blocks make everything easier when it comes to planting day. Just plop them in. It's my first time using these little pots, and I feel like that worked out really great, and that was really easy to pop out. I'm just mulching everything with all the old mulch that was here. I planted out my spinach here, and this is 2 different varieties, and one of the varieties is this butterfly spinach, which I'm really excited about. This is supposed to be more bolt resistant spinach, which would be really nice because spinach is one of those things that tends to bolt on me pretty quickly. So I'm just going to seed out the other half of this with some seeds here. I'm really hoping to be able to freeze dry a decent amount of spinach over the springtime. I really like to throw frozen spinach into things, and I would really like to have some freeze dried spinach on hand. That way I can blend it up and throw it into things really easily. And also it just would be really easy to throw into like soups and stews and things like that. I love freeze dried herbs, so I'm really hyped about being able to do spinach. And that's the thing, I've tried to grow spinach the last few years since I've gotten a freeze dryer, and I've had like some of the worst spinach years out of probably all of my years growing the last few years. Ma'am, how did you get out? Ah, thank you. There you go. I'm telling you, I need to clip their wings. Keep forgetting. My pepper is turning red. This is a paprika pepper. This is the Hungarian Magyar. I got the seeds from Renee's garden. This is a pepper I've grown now, I want to say for 4 years. It might be a little over 4 years now. It's one of my absolute favorites. I dry it out for paprika powder. It is so easy to dry even if you only have a dehydrator. It's really thin walled. And at the end of last year, I decided I wanted to try to overwinter one of my pepper plants, and this thing started to put on a bunch of peppers, and I just decided why not, since this was one big experiment anyway. I do need to water this really bad, but the fact that I have a red pepper right now at the beginning of March is mind-blowing to me, but that is super fun, especially since I'm down here to show you guys the peppers. Everything is doing really, really well, and I have not thinned any of them out, and I really need to now that they're really starting to get on their true leaves and everything. So the only issue I did end up having was habaneros. I did reseed them, but it seems like I might not be the only one. I posted a random story on Instagram talking about how the only pepper for me not to germinate was my habaneros, and one of you guys commented on one of my posts and said you guys had the exact same issue. So unfortunately, I still don't have any, and I reseeded these at least a week ago now, and yeah. But for the most part, the peppers did really good. It looks like I have one serrano that didn't germinate. I have one paprika that didn't germinate. That's fine. I started extras of those. I have more up there. But one thing I'm going to do first is I have my pruners, and when I thin things out, I like to actually just cut the extra plant because that will have less root disturbance on the one I want to keep. I do like to clean my pruners with a little bit of alcohol. This just makes sure that nothing is on my pruners and then I'm spreading disease or something like that to other plants. This is something I really like to make sure I do during the summer as well. I might get a little lazy, and I definitely don't clean them after like I cut every plant while I'm outside, but for the most part I really try to make sure my pruners stay as clean as possible, so I'm not spreading more bad things around the garden. So I'm just gonna get these all thinned out. Honestly, I'm probably going to feed these seedlings the next time they need watered, now that they're putting on their true leaves. And as far as seed starting goes for March, I believe I'm starting my loofahs in the next few days, next week. And then the week after that, I'll be starting all of my tomatoes. I kind of hold off on my tomatoes. Last year, I held off It was 5 weeks before my plant out date. So I typically like to plant out a lot of my frost tender things that first week of May, just to give me a little bit of wiggle room in case we do end up having something fluke. That way too, if something is more advanced and I need to just get it out, we're pretty much in the clear. Tomatoes are one of those things that grow really, really quickly. And I found that if I start them at that 5-week mark, I'm typically getting them outside before they get really big, and it's just easier to harden tomatoes off that way. And they're just a lot easier not to deal with inside. Honestly, I find dealing with tomato seedlings to be one of the trickier things. They're kind of prima donnas when it comes to certain things, and I don't enjoy necessarily allowing them to get bigger than about this in my basement. I have had a few seasons, especially early on, where my tomato starts were massive, and honestly, they were more of just a pain in my butt. And I said never again. But those won't be started until that third week of March, so like 2 more weeks, and then a week or 2 after that, 4 weeks out. So the first week of April, I'm starting a lot of my flowers, and that's it for the first round of seed starting already, which is crazy. The whole seed starting room, I'm not gonna lie, feels a little bare. Now that I got all of that planted, I really have so much extra room. So here's the snapdragons here, and then also the dahlias. I'm really hyped. I'm so excited about my flowers this year, but it feels so good to really see the garden already progressing. Like I can really see a difference in the garlic and the irises already, and it's crazy. Spring is here and there's so much that needs to be done, but I think I'm going to leave you guys here and I'm going to make a decision on these strawberries, and I'm sure the next time I see you, I will plant them, because I need to. I also need to do like direct seeding of nasturtiums and a few other things. So yeah, we still have a lot to do here in the month of March, but thank you so much for joining me over the last few days as I got onions and all of my cool other crops planted for the most part. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye.